Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that. All right, then you
That's
want to add in your M&Ms. Holden, I'm going to give this to you first to see as the fancy chef here.
Oh, man.
We get a little bit of stir in here. So we got the peanut butter in there. We got probably 4 tablespoons of water. And we got our M&Ms.
This is looking. Welcome to the In the Field podcast, where we speak to veterans, service members, and those in the transition process to learn about their stories. Gus, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Absolutely. Really appreciate it. The first question I ask all our guests, when was the last time you had an MRE?
2009.
Okay.
So it's been 15 years.
Are you feeling excited, trepidatious? What emotions are you feeling right now?
It's like an emotional time capsule.
Yep.
I'm thinking about, the first memory is Ranger School MREs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was, because, you're hungry a little bit in the first phase, but I think the second phase is when you get really, really hungry.
Yep.
And I remember I had a pound cake, a lemon poppy seed pound cake that I had saved.
Those are pretty good.
Pretty good. And it was one of the, I can't remember when it was, but we just got finished with the patrol, and we were going to have an hour of sleep before they threw the RD Sims and you have to run up a mountain. And I got into my sleeping bag and I opened the lemon seed poppy pound cake and I bit into it and I felt it through my entire body.
Oh,
it was so good. And I just remember it was like a hug, a warm hug. And I just remember eating that pound cake. So that's one memory. And there's more. There's several food memories in Ranger School. But then I remember Iraq. I remember my second deployment. I was on a FOB. I was in FOB Merez in Mosul. Mm-hmm. And you would have the pallets, and they would sit in the sun all day. And the first thing is they'd be rat-effed, the Army term. And that's
we can bleep it if you say it. It's all
rat. So once folks had already dug into the MREs and taken all the good stuff out by the time they got to us. So all the MREs were open and half empty. And so you'd have just the most garbage food.
Yeah.
And the cheese would always, it was so hot, the cheese would separate.
Ooh, yeah. No amount of kneading is going to put that back together.
Even if you kneaded it, it's like all greasy and chunky. Mm-hmm. And it was always just a very sad experience if you had to eat an MRE. So that's what I've been thinking about.
Yep. Well, fantastic. Hopefully setting a little bit better than Mosul. Probably slightly better than Ranger School.
Yeah.
Though, some people's stances on New York, maybe not so much. But, guests always get to pick first. So feel free, talking about rat fucking, the box. So some of these have changed, so you might not recognize them. I don't recommend the pizza. As much as you might think, let's try it. It's not good.
All right, let's try Menu 14 Mexican style rice and bean bowl.
Okay, fantastic.
I brought my own knife.
Ooh, you're coming prepared. That's a first on the show, and I respect it.
This was a present from the Iraqi Army, the 11th Iraqi Army.
Oh my God, that is very cool.
I haven't kept it sharp, and it's a little rusty, I think.
Let's see if I can can I get that on the shot? Oh, I'm not looking, but hopefully we can get that in frame. That is very cool. Actually, I just touched it too, and it just made me think of the Lord of the Rings.
Still sharp. All right, not too bad.
Yeah. Oh, not pepperoni. What do we do here? I'm being indecisive.
I'm
going to do beef ravioli.
See, I was thinking about the beef ravioli too. That would have been my second choice.
Okay,
so wait, first off, this is a huge improvement. As a former infantryman, you used to come in these cardboard boxes, and the first thing we all had to do was field strip them. So take them all out of the cardboard box, and you'd put them back into this little thing, and you'd wrap this thing up tight and duct tape it, for the field. So this is great. This is vacuum sealed.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The people at the MRE Innovation Unit, I'm going to pretend like that's a real thing. They're doing something. They're getting that feedback, and they're iterating, and they're making improvements because, I got lucky. I think there's some MREs, not MREs, M&Ms in this one. So this is a high value.
Okay, so here's the
MRE.
move. This is pretzel nuggets, honey mustard, and onion, which sounds great. But one of my favorite things was the really high-end Ranger pudding. So your basic Ranger pudding is just your cocoa powder with your sugar and creamer. You stir it up, a little bit of water. But if you have like a little bit of cracker or the M&Ms, you could put a little bit of cracker in there for consistency and crunch.
Yep.
And then the M&Ms in there.
That's not, you know what's funny? Actually, our last guest, I think not to that extent, but turned it into pudding. It's so funny because when you hear that statement, it sounds like prison food. I'd gone down this weird rabbit hole of TikTok where I learned about prison recipes, and it's basically just army food. Like you take the creamer and then you wrap it up and you light it on fire. It's like, what are we doing here? But when you're in the field, you got to have fun with it, right? You got to find something that tastes good.
And I love the names that the Army has for things. This is a First Strike nutrition energy bar.
You got to make it sound good, right?
Yeah. The other, Ripits, of course.
Yep.
I don't know if that was an Army brand, but I feel like it might have been.
I have no idea. I haven't seen them outside of a military setting. Like I'm assuming you have to be able to find them elsewhere. But the funniest story of Ripits was we were closing down our COP. We were running out of batteries. We needed a nighttime, I'm going to now forget my Army words here, a nighttime resupply. And so they drop off, a case of batteries or whatever for our radios and all that. But then also like 4 cases of Ripits. And I just think that's hilarious that like we're closing down a COP, like we're running out of ammo, we're running out of batteries. Like this is mission critical stuff. And then they go, but like they need their caffeine too, right?
Guys,
like
Ripits.
we got to get them Ripits.
Your deployment was Afghanistan or did you do Iraq?
Afghanistan. So yeah, 2012 to 2013, the Wardak Logar region. That was 173rd.
Did you have a local energy drink? Tiger, like, okay, so I honestly can't remember the real name, but in Iraq we called it Tiger Penis.
No.
But it was a tiger-shaped energy drink that had nicotine in it, and it burned your face.
That.
It burned your mouth. Yeah, so the Ripits were good, but the Tiger Penis is what you wanted on patrol.
I never knew I was going to say this statement, but I really wish I got deployed to Iraq. I feel like I missed out. I think I need a re-enlist just for that 100%. Experience.
Now, would you do peanut butter for cheese?
Ooh, let's see. Do I have? Because I would 100% do that.
Yeah, that's usually most people will do peanut butter for cheese, but I always prefer the cheese.
Cheese.
Let's do it.
There we go. Thank you. That's a good deal.
And what I like about this too is it's the pure cheese spread, which I actually preferred over the cheese with jalapeno.
Really? I feel like that's a hot take.
Yeah, that's different. I think and I think this is back to Iraq too. I think the cheese spread kept its consistency better.
Without like
cheese
some
with
extra
jalapeno.
fat or something like that,
Like in real life, I love jalapenos, and I'd always be a cheese and jalapeno guy. But for whatever reason, prefer the Army cheese.
I don't mind. Funny enough, actually, a few days ago, I was hungry and I had a couple leftover cheese and crackers. I'm like, guess I'll have some MRE cheese and crackers. Not bad. Talking about funny names, Recovery Bar Salted Caramel Marshmallow Crisp. I've never heard of that.
Salted marshmallow sounds nice.
Fruit punch. Did you get any to drink in yours? Or?
I got chocolate hazelnut protein.
Okay.
That sounds pretty exciting.
Were you a fan of those protein?
We didn't have them. We just had cocoa beverage base powder.
Yep.
The real good one though was if you could get the cherry beverage base powder, then you could make cherry cheesecake, which would be the cherry base powder, the cheese and crackers, your sugar packet, and you could mix that up, and it's pretty tasty.
I don't remember it. I feel like there's so many things I forgot. I don't know if I've had amnesia or what. But I feel like there's so many things I forgot from my time in the service.
It's like a little time capsule.
Exactly. I feel like also people always remember certain things. Yeah. So here's a question. Thoughts on MRE gum?
Yeah, is it a laxative, right? That's always the... I think absolutely it has to be. Positive it's a laxative. The other one was Charms. Do you remember Charms? It was a little hard. Maybe it was because I got it in 2009, so it was a little hard candy packet.
Was it the mints with caffeine?
It wasn't mints. It was just candy. It was like a lifesaver type thing, but it was Charms. But you could not eat that. If you got that, you had to throw it out into the woods.
Really?
Because it angered the rain gods.
Okay.
So 100%, if that ever popped up, people would get pissed you had it. So a lot of times you had to just not say you got it and just hide it away.
Yep.
But you couldn't eat it. You had to throw it out.
Huh.
Yeah.
This is something where maybe I just don't remember this.
There's got to be, maybe not a full book, but there's got to be a zine or something that.
Exactly, you know? Like some sort of comic book on all the things.
The lore.
We don't have to share, but if you want to, there's a little. It's just a Rice
like
Krispie.
A Rice Krispie
Yeah, it's a Rice Krispie.
Protein enhanced. What do they call it? They just call it by. They give it one of the Army nomenclature names.
Oh my God, it is very chewy and very dry.
All right, so this is great cheese color.
All natural too. You can only find that kind of orange in nature.
This is in nature. So I grew up in a military family, and so my dad would bring home MREs and I'd eat them. But the old school MREs were white. There was like a white cheese.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was exciting.
And so this is a great part of the show too. Trying to chew really dry food and talk at the same time is a challenge. But you said your dad served in the military.
Right.
You know, high school Gus. Where are you at? Do you know that you're going to want to serve? Like, what was your decision making when it came to enlisted, officer, the academy versus ROTC? Did you have a clear path?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of what I would call myself. I was kind of a tool bag about it. I mean, all I wanted to do was be in the military since I was a little kid. I remember begging my mom to get a high and tight. I mean, we lived in Fayetteville, and my dad didn't have a high and tight, but like all the other soldiers had high and tights. That's all I wanted. She wouldn't let me get one for years, and I begged her, and finally I got it, and I was like, yes. So yeah, I just had always wanted to be in the military, and when it was getting closer, I really wanted to enlist. And then my dad basically said, look, if you're going to be in, you should try to be an officer. And so I applied to 3 schools, Westpoint, the Citadel, and VMI. And when I looked at the Citadel and VMI, they both required like $100 for application fee, and no one has that kind of money. Yeah. So I just applied to Westpoint and got early in and went.
What was your preparation going to Westpoint? I mean, having your dad serve, did you kind of have an idea of what you were getting yourself into, or what was kind of the biggest shock?
It was actually really difficult because, so my dad was in 7th Special Forces Group, and these were like the 80s Green Berets. So they had all been trained by like Vietnam guys, and they were all deployed constantly to South America, to Central America, Peru, fighting the Sendero Luminoso, to El Salvador. I mean, all over the place in all of these like Cold War battles, essentially. I mean, Panama had kicked off, and my dad was in Panama during Just Cause. And so when I grew up with all these, killers, know. And, my dad he taught me land nav when I was young. He taught me shooting when I was young. He snuck me into like
allegedly,
the 7th group, like arms room.
Yeah.
And we went out to the firing range, and they had all the foreign weapons. So I got to shoot Uzis. I got to shoot AKs. I got to like do all this amazing fun stuff. And it was really a wild childhood because you had all this military stuff, and all those guys were all in motorcycle clubs, to be polite about it. And so the weekends when they were back, it was just all the Green Berets, all, bikers, all their kids. We'd have pig pickings. I mean, it was just, we'd all be fighting and just having a lot of fun. So it was a really, really fun, really wild childhood. And I thought West Point, I was going to learn more soldiering. Like I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to shoot. I wanted to do, all the soldier stuff.
The Army,
get really good at it. And I got to West Point, and it was all spit and polish parades, make your bed tight, shine your shoes. And that was all like, what do we call it? Chicken shit. That was all the stuff that, and I was young, so I was immature. And that was all the stuff that I hated. Yeah. So I hated that. And kind of subsequently, I hated a lot of West Point. Loved all the field stuff when we actually got to do field stuff. Yeah. Like we have a summer called Buckner, and you get to do infantry stuff, and I love that. And I really excelled at it and did well at Buckner. And I did well in school because I was a really good student. But all the spit and polish stuff, I just hated it so much. I thought it was so pointless and stupid. I get now, the discipline and all that kind of stuff. But because of that, I got in a lot of trouble, and I was kind of like I was probably more of a shitbag cadet. But I had about 120 hours of marching punishment at Westpoint. If you're familiar with that, the marching punishment.
I was enlisted, so
No.
I mean, well, I know about getting
Yeah.
smoked and all that, but not
Yeah.
the Westpoint style.
It's culture.
Yeah.
So when you get in trouble, you get hours, and you could do in my day you could do 2 hours on Friday, 5 on Saturday, 5 on Sunday, and there's a courtyard, and you march back and forth for 2 hours or 5 hours, or and you can't leave, you can't do anything until you get your hours done.
Right.
And so one thing, you get pretty good at like playing movies in your head.
Yep.
So you just I would pick a couple movies, and I try to just play them scene by scene in my head, as you march back and forth.
I am good at that. Oh, I'm very good at that from just regular,
Just Army life.
Yeah. Marching or whatever, 15 milers or rocking.
The long marches. So they call that being a sentry man. So I got in trouble a lot. I never really had much, West Point rank. I was like my senior year, I think I was they call it a trunk room officer, which is like my responsibility. The scope they entrusted me with is to go to the trunk rooms and make sure the trunks were all lined up, But I did really well on all the Army stuff, and I wish. I mean, I love West Point now, but I wish looking back, I would have made more of the opportunity and kind of. I've heard you talk about this before, but like understand the game of it.
Yep.
And I eventually did later on, and I started to do a lot better, actually because of one of our mutual friends, Tim Shaw, who was in my company at West Point. And he was good at both. He was good at both the bullshit stuff as well as the military stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, he gets it. I'm like, oh, I should be like that.
Did you ever think that maybe there are clear differences between officers and the enlisted ranks, right? And so I only know the enlisted side. I got offered green to gold, and there was that opportunity to go to West Point, but I've never really been exposed to it outside of now. I feel like all my friends are officers, and so I feel like, and I say this jokingly, I've betrayed my enlisted brethrens of going to the dark side and having now more officer ranks. But a lot of what you're saying of that, like, I mean, the enlisted side is that army, right? There is that veil, the veil of the officer kind of bullshit of, the paperwork isn't really there on the enlisted side until you get really, higher up in the ranks. Did that cross your mind at all? Or like you knew you wanted to be an officer and this was just one of the things that you had to put up with?
I mean, the only reason I became an officer was because of my dad and his saying like, listen, I mean, he was enlisted. I don't know if I said that, but he was enlisted. And he had been in the Air Force, he'd been in the Marines, and then he joined the Army, and then he went to Special Forces. And he just, straight up told me, look, you're going to like everything better if you're an officer. And, I think he's right to some extent, but I wonder if I would have been happier if I would have just enlisted and been able to do the soldier stuff, the whole time. It's such a hard trade-off because there's so many benefits of being an officer in terms of the career path, and, being a platoon leader is awesome.
Yeah.
But after that, as an officer, that's kind of the platoon leader may become the commander, but platoon leader is a great job.
Yeah.
But I sometimes think, enlisted maybe would have been better for me personally, and especially nowadays where being enlisted, there's a lot of opportunity post enlistment. There's more opportunity than I think there was kind of when I was coming in.
I really struggle with this line of conversation because I've thought about this a lot too. I mean, I don't have a kid yet. Do you have a kid?
Yeah. I have a 2-year-old who's amazing, and we can talk about him all day. He's excellent. I love him so much. And then I have one on the way in January.
Okay. Well, congratulations. And so, I mean, I guess, for you, right, that's still maybe 15 years, 14 years, I guess, depending on when people start to seriously think of college. But having been enlisted, I think similar to your father, I'm okay with my kid. There's some people who have served and say like, I don't really want my kid to serve. I think I'm okay with that, but I do kind of go like I dealt with so much bullshit on the enlisted side, and I see so many of my friends now who went the officer route, and then went out and got their MBAs, and the officer network, I think, is a lot stronger post-military than it is on the enlisted. And to your point, it is getting better, right? Yeah. I mean, not to make myself an example, but like I ended up doing well for myself.
Yeah.
I was able to go to Stanford. I've been able to do these things. But there's a lot of enlisted people that I know that just like,
Me too.
I figured this out by happenstance. I happened to know somebody who introduced me to somebody, and like I stumbled my way through it.
Yep.
Or I think a lot of officers that are like, I got out and, a fellow classmate did this and now there's this organization or, McKinsey wants me because I'm, a captain or a major or whatever. Yeah. But also to your point, it's like, well, is my kid actually going to be happy? And like, do they actually want to do that? Yeah. It's a tricky thing because I think as a parent, you want what's best for your kid. But then at the same time, it's like, did you actually like want to do it?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons we founded Service to School was because we had seen there's so much capability and so much potential and so much heart in our enlisted soldiers. And with the GI Bill and the misuse of that and the preying upon the GI Bill folks by a lot of for-profits, not all, but many, we founded Service to School to make sure that enlisted soldiers could get to the best school that they could get into.
Yeah.
And so I think some of those opportunities are there. But, the price to entry in our world for 99% of people is going to be getting an education. Yeah. Getting a bachelor's degree or getting... So for a few, yes, if you have a level of economic security and a level of risk appetite, founding a company or doing that without a college degree will work for you. But I think the vast majority, when you look at the people that were able to be successful entrepreneurs without a college degree, it's folks that came from really, really wealthy families or well-off families where their risk appetite, they had a fallback. And that fallback was, okay, worst case, I'll go to law school. So that's all to say. I think for the majority of people, a bachelor's degree is the price of entry into economic stability. And if you're enlisted and you don't have one, that's real challenging. And I think that was a little bit of the challenge. My family wasn't really very economically stable. I mean, my dad made more than your average enlisted soldier. So he had jump pay. Sometimes he had combat pay. He sometimes didn't have combat pay even if he was in combat because the situation in the 80s. But we were, well below middle class, right? And so for me, and I didn't know any options. Like I said, I applied to 3 military schools, and I wasn't even aware of I had heard of a Harvard or things like that, but that was never in a realm of even thinking about for me. Right. Much less, a lot of the enlisted soldiers. So, all that to say, I think we that choice for your kid, do they join the Army? Do they enlist? Do they whatever? A lot of your socioeconomic background matters. And I find like the more stable I get financially, the more I'm like, just want my kid to be happy. Yeah. Whereas if you're not stable economically, the first thing you want to do is make some money. Yeah. And that's kind of that factors into the equation a lot.
Service to School is not a sponsor, but they literally could pay me nothing, and I will have them gladly be a sponsor of this show. I mean, I've said this a million times over. The only reason why I'm where I am today is Service to School and Warrior Scholar Project. But I mean, they're just so incredible in terms of what they provide. And this topic has come up a few times in episodes is like, you just don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so much of life is just the opportunities that are presented to you. 100%. And if you don't know what those opportunities are, like, you're shit out of luck.
Yeah. We had, now, I have maybe a couple stories if you want to hear them on that one. So I remember, like I said, soldiers, highly capable enlisted soldiers, tons of potential and tons of heart. But we had this one guy. This was one of the impetuses of Service to School, one of the beginning seeds of it. Goats. He was an FO too. He was a fister.
Yep.
In our, a company has, when you're a company, you have a squad, or not a squadron, a squad, maybe more. I can't remember the structure, but you have a squad of people in your company that do, fire support. And Goats was our FO, and he was a character, as many are. Mm-hmm. And I forget why I was on this, but they were doing an inspection, like a barracks inspection, which is usually, it's pure NCO business. Mm-hmm. Officers aren't involved in it. So I forget why I was involved in it. Maybe I was friends with Sergeant Bush, who was the main. He was also like the master mason of Grafenwehr Vilsec. Mm-hmm. So he could get you a range card, which was the range cut in between Graf and Vilsec and saved like 45 minutes of commute time. Yeah. So, but I was with Bush and Goats, and we're there inspecting Goats' room, and we look in there, and Goats has this beautiful set of encyclopedias. Huh. And they were like, Goats, why do you have all these brand new encyclopedias? And he was like, well, you're going to go to college, you need books. And we're like, what? Like when you go to college, you got to get the books they tell you to get.
Yeah.
And Bush asked him, how much do these cost? He was like, it's an installment, Sergeant, but it was overall it's about $2,000.
Oh my God.
And we were both like, Goats, who sold you these? And there was some, this is the worst, there was some retired NCO and he had one of those, he's a guy, I forget his name exactly, but it was like a 2 first names. It was like Tommy Thompson or Johnny Johnson or something.
He's slinging encyclopedias on the side.
Homeboy would wait outside the mess hall and see soldiers and be like, hey, you want to go to school? And line for line would go say, hey, you want to go to school? You need books. And he'd sell them encyclopedias. So as soon as that happened, we both went out and found this guy. And we're like, if you ever talk to any of our soldiers again, we're going to take action. And got him out of there. But that's one, he had a good heart and he just didn't know what he didn't know.
Yeah.
And he's making bad financial decisions and he's got a brand new set of encyclopedias in his room.
Were they at least nice encyclopedias?
They're beautiful. Oh. They're beautiful, but I don't know how he's going to ship those from Germany.
Like 30 pounds of books, if not more. Before we get into your transition from Westpoint into the service, and we touched on this a little bit, let's. Do you want to go heated or unheated?
Oh, unheated. Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Unheated.
We
yeah.
can.
I mean, look, I respect your choices as a man, but I think I got so used to eating them unheated. It just heating them up made them taste weird to me.
I would say 90% of the times I had MREs, they were probably unheated. I'm saying that high of a percent to make myself feel better after your comments. But
the thing is, it gets a little too hot sometimes and it burns my fingers. So it's more. I pretend
I don't like when the water gets over. I can't really fill up the line.
Messy.
Well, we can at least crack open the M&Ms before we get to the main entree. So
you know what we might need to do though.
What's that?
With the M&Ms? Do you want to try to make the high scale?
We can try that. Yeah. I would love to go through we'll turn this into a cooking podcast.
Yeah. So the issue with this packet is you want the packet on the side for the Ranger pudding, and this shape, I guess the shape makes it easier to drink, but
not as conducive.
Not as conducive as as you want for the pudding. All right. So let's see if we can still make this. The other trick with the Ranger pudding is you don't want to put too much water. Water is how about some of that peanut butter too? You mind?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. No. So all right. So we got fresh water. We've got just cut a little bit so this.
And the spoon. You need the killer spoon.
All right.
You can always add more water. You can't take away water. It's an important. Important aspect of this operation.
So anyone listening can follow along.
So
you just need cocoa powder, peanut butter, a little bit of water, a spoon.
You want to add start with a couple tablespoons.
Yep.
You're gonna have to use sight to do it, but
don't think we'll need Tabasco sauce for that.
Nope. Did you ever do the dab the Tabasco sauce on the eyes?
No, never that. I would do the. Especially in AIT, the hand sanitizer in the calf pocket, and if you're falling asleep, put it in your hand and just huff. That's definitely not killing brain cells whatsoever.
No more than AIT probably.
No, exactly.
All the Ranger games they want to play there. All right, we're getting. I'm being very cautious with the water, so it's
I know in a suit no less is a dangerous game we're playing here. Hopefully, you have a good. Dry cleaner just in case.
You know it. The other, maybe as I stir this up, the other service to school story I want to tell you and kind of why it exists. There was one of our earlier applicants. He'd grown up in South Central, right? So grew up maybe in not the best neighborhood. And then he didn't do great in high school. And so he joined the Army Reserves, actually. Was a behavioral specialist. And in the Army Reserves, did what the Army's supposed to do. Gave him discipline. He got better. And he's like, hey, you know what? I'm not an idiot. I'm good. I'm actually good at this. I have capability. And then he went to community college after that, before he knew about service to school, which, we recommend community college, but he had gone there. Straight A's in community college. Killed community college. He's like, oh, man, I'm actually pretty smart when I put my mind to it, right?
Yeah.
And then, so then he started applying to colleges. And around this process, we started to talk to him. But he only applied to the colleges that he had heard of. DeVry, Corinthians, U Phoenix. And so we talked to him, and he was like, oh, you know what? Why don't you try, his grades were great background. We're like, try Stanford. Yeah. And he got his DeVry acceptance, and literally the day he was going to sign for DeVry, he got into Stanford.
What a step. Scissors, water?
M&Ms.
M&Ms. Oh, right.
We got a great consistency.
Yeah, there we go.
I don't know if you can see it, but it's you want to get it this nice, smooth. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that. All right, then you
That's
want to add in your
wonderful.
M&Ms. Hold, and I'm going to give this to you first to see as the fancy chef here.
Oh, man.
We get a little bit of stir in here. So we got the peanut butter in there. We got probably 4 tablespoons of water. And we got our M&Ms.
This is looking... Let's see if we get a even closer shot. That's looking wonderful right there.
That's a Fat Boy Ranger pudding right there.
I mean, when a pro is doing it, it's going to... Oh, my God. All right, hold on.
Try a big bite, brother. You might want to try a smaller bite at first. As good as it can get with Ranger pudding.
I mean, or if you want to, yeah. That's pretty good.
I'll give you a couple other, you can put a coffee packet in here to make it mocha. You can put a little crackers in there to give yourself a little bit more crunch, especially if you don't have the M&Ms.
Honestly, this Rice Krispie in there would probably be a good consistency. That is fantastic.
We'll say this, that's good, but the original beverage-based cocoa powder, more chocolatey.
Really?
Yep, more chocolatey.
Because we've seen like relatively good improvement on the overall. Maybe it's just the entree or the overall MRE. Did not know the maybe the cocoa powder has I don't know, maybe they're trying to make it more healthy or
give you a little bit more protein.
Yeah.
We know more about protein now than we did
back 20 years ago or 10 years ago. So Westpoint, you wanted to go infantry officer.
Yep.
You had to stack rank it. Got your first choice.
You don't have to be too smart to be infantry. Actually, what I did, because other thing I saw with my dad and his friends, all my dad had over 200 jumps. All his team members over 200. They're jumping all the time. They were all broken down. So I saw, and they all broke something. My dad broke his butt on a jump. He broke his ankle. One of his medic on his team broke his back. Everybody was broken at some point. And so I wanted to be in the infantry, but I also thought, like, gosh, how do I want to be broken down like that when I'm 33? So I did a branch detail. So I did infantry to MI, military intelligence, because I thought that I was interested in that as well. I was like, hey, let me get the tactical experience as an infantry officer, and then go into the intelligence community. But in the Army, with all the deployments, they decided that wasn't going to happen, and I was just going to stay infantry the whole time. So yeah, it wasn't difficult to get infantry though. Yeah, stacked ranked.
But it's like one of the most sought after one in Westpoint. Is that not true?
It's sought after. We have a lot of slots though as well.
Got it.
So, and honestly, I don't know. I had good grades at Westpoint. I really tried hard academically. So I could have gone pretty much any branch, and I think I could have probably gone most posts as well.
So academically, you did well. Just
yeah, I did well academically.
Maybe not discipline, but
discipline was the issue. Yeah, I didn't have any. None of the leaders saw me as like someone that should have a leadership role at Westpoint. Did well academically, did okay physically. There's just some absolute studs at Westpoint. And then like gymnastics, I'd never done gymnastics. So I wrestled in high school, but I didn't do like cartwheels and stuff. So, academically above average, but okay. And then military, when it was like Buckner or in the field, did really well.
Credits.
Yeah, but then if it was like making your bed, not my thing.
Yeah. When you then got out of Westpoint, your first unit, was that kind of a breath of fresh air?
Yeah, 100%.
Like
even
feeling
getting
like,
out of Westpoint,
I'm doing the thing that I was meaning to.
Even officer basic course, or we called it an infantry officer basic course, IOBC. Even that was like finally, you know, because I was in the field. I was doing field stuff. I was with infantry folks that wanted to do infantry things. So that was, once it was that, then I was set. And then the other thing for me is I'd grown up in the military, and I grew up in an enlisted family with enlisted folks. So, you know, the enlisted soldier to me was like with my dad, you know? So that was, it was, you know, I never felt that enlisted officer divide, actually. But, you know, it's interesting, you mentioned it earlier, and I didn't realize it as much. I went to Columbia University to talk to some vets up there. And I said, hey, I went to Westpoint, I was an infantry officer, and the entire group was like shut down. As soon as I said that, and I didn't know why, I was like, why do they hate me all of a sudden? Once I got out into the Army, it was great.
Was there any, I mean, growing up in an enlisted family, like, was there any shock value or anything that maybe caught you off guard? Because I can imagine being potentially one step removed, right? The kid of an enlisted service member, right? Or the kid of an Army guy. Like, you're seeing it from one step removed. And then when you got into that situation, was there anything like you're like, oh, this is actually now, like, I had my preconceived notions and this is how it actually works? Or did it feel like a fairly smooth?
It felt smooth.
Yeah.
It felt like this is kind of like coming home sort of thing. Yeah.
And then what did you do while you were in? Like, how was your time in the service? Did you at that point think you were going to do 20 years, or what was going through your mind, and how did you frame your military service in terms of a career?
I was open to it. I think I had seen my dad and his friends start to retire.
Yeah. And
for some of them, it's not a lot of money, you know? No. So you retire, you've been a Green Beret for 20 years, or like my uncle. My uncle was infantry, and he retired at 20. And then it's kind of like, it's not necessarily a great retirement. You still got to work, you know. Or my uncle actually, they both live in Tennessee. My dad and my uncle. My uncle lives totally off the grid. Yeah. So he just went off the grid. He built his own house. He has his own water system, his own, sewage.
And what are the grid coordinates of that?
Yeah. You can try. He's got a range out there. He's got it's set up. Yeah, you're not going to sneak up on him. That's an option. But yeah, it's tough. And so that was weighing on my mind. Like, gosh, even if I did 20, am I still going to have the financial security? Because again, this whole thing about financial security was always kind of weighing on my mind a little bit. Plus, the body being broke down, and all those things.
It's a lot. I mean, I remember, and maybe I said this story already, but I was in a training rotation in Germany, and I talked to one of the referees when you're doing your training rotation, and somehow his age came up. He was like, "Oh, I'm like 30 or 31." And this guy, I mean, fully gray hair, like, I mean, wrinkles everywhere. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
I'm like, if that's what the Army does, after 10 years, or I guess 12 years, I'm like, I'm not looking for that. I mean, it takes a toll. And I mean, this is nothing to say. I mean, people who do 20, right? It's your choice. I mean, do you want to be in the corporate slog? Do you want to be in school? Like, I mean, everything has its pros and cons, but it just, for me, was like, this is, I don't see myself doing, I had thought about it, I think especially, after deployment, even I was, I really loved the 173rd. It was a great unit, I had great leadership, but there's just that little voice in the back of my head going like, but like there might be something else. And I'm so glad I PCS, because it showed me a different side of the Army. Right. And just like the kind of the good and the bad, and going like, well, this is what you want to do for 20 years? And my answer was no. Yeah. And so for you, what was that impetus, or was there this kind of light switch that happened that went, nope, I'm ready to get out?
Yeah. I still think I might have done 20, or I might have stayed in longer. I think it was a few things. One, my wife never really enjoyed the Army lifestyle. And, in my time, infantry was all male. And it was still kind of don't ask, don't tell. So all the spouses were women, and you had to play the game. All right. And it wasn't terrible, but you really had to, it wasn't super political, but you had to be friends with everybody's wife, kind of thing. You had to have the tea parties still. You had to have a tea party, FRG. And so she didn't really want to do that. And she also really wanted a career. and she's incredibly smart and talented. She went to business school before me. She went to Cornell.
How did you meet her?
I met her at a at one of the Westpoint balls.
Okay.
So it's kind of, I'll tell the story. I know I'm telling a lot of stories.
No, this is what this is. I love stories,
Okay.
so this is what it's all about.
So I had a friend, Ben. Ben was from upstate New York. Ben came to me and my friends and said, "Hey, I've got these girls from upstate New York. All they've ever wanted to do was go to this Westpoint formal dance." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah. Do you want to let me set you up with these girls?" And I was like, "No, I don't." I was gonna make this like me and my buddies were gonna go stag and then go party or something after. And so he kept asking. Finally, I was like, "Sure. Why not? Why not meet a live person rather than do whatever we were gonna go do?" Meanwhile, when I talked to my wife about this later, he told them the opposite. He told them, "Hey, I got these thirsty guys at West Point that need dates. There's no girls. They can't get any girls. Desperate for." So he told them that. He told me, I have no idea why he did this. So we got set up on a blind date. We got set up matched on height because I'm pretty short and she's a little shorter than me. And so we got matched up on height and we went out to the dance. We had a great time. And I really enjoyed spending time with her, talked to her afterwards. And I remember it was a weekend and the Monday after going to class and it was like a military history class, right? I get there kind of early and on the chalkboard written was love, marriage, Vassar. And she'd gone to Vassar. And I was like, what? So that kind of got my brain kind of perked up. I was like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And no one wrote it. I didn't know who wrote it. The teacher came in. I was like, who wrote this? Just erased it. It's like, what? And so then, so I'm thinking about that all day. I mean, I liked her, right? But I wasn't like, she wasn't like Monday. I wasn't like, thinking about Emily.
Yeah.
So I see that. I'm like, whoa, that's weird. So walking around all day, and then in the evening, I'm going into, they had this tunnel. It's like I think it's the Beat Air Force tunnel. And there's a plebe, and when you're a plebe, you have to chant in that tunnel, beat the hell out of Air Force. So I hear, beat the hell out of Air Force, beat the hell out of Air Force, beat the hell. So I walk by this plebe. It's underground because there's a road, and the tunnel goes under the road. So I go into the road, and I'm just thinking about it. And I'm like, man, is this who I'm supposed to marry? Yeah. I look up, shooting stars, like a whole sky full. Yeah. So
if there's ever a sign.
Yeah. So I mean that happened, and then I was like, well, okay, I guess that's what that's going to be. So yeah. So we got married. So that's how I met her, and then we got married the December of 2004 before I went to Ranger School.
Okay.
And we've been together since. So doing 20 this year.
How close is the Zales or the Jareds near the West Point? I mean, after that, I feel like you're like, I got to book it to the nearest.
We know what she did. They actually, before I proposed, her and her mom went and booked the wedding site, the venue, because the venue, you have to book it a little bit. They're like, yeah, he's going to propose.
Yeah.
Like,
we're feeling it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's how we met. And then, she went to business school. She wanted a career in business. She went to business school. She's been at American Express since then for like the last almost 20 years. Or I guess it'd be, 17 years. But yeah. And so she was less keen on me being in the military.
Yeah.
And I wanted her to have a career. And then the other factor was, I had some really rough deployments. My first deployment was 2005, platoon leader in Mosul. At the time was, 12, 14-hour patrols. We're basically just targets. I mean, we did some raids, some kind of non-time sensitive type raids. But it was just getting blown up, getting mortared, snipers. And it was basically one out of every 5 patrols. So once a week,
just something
was going down, which actually that deployment, it was more exciting and fun than it was anything else. But it was like, looking back, it was a pretty kinetic deployment. And then my second deployment was 15 months, maybe 16 months during the surge, and we were in Sadr City. And so that was the siege of Sadr City. They call it now in like 07, 08. And that, the first deployment, I didn't lose anybody. The second deployment, we lost a lot of people. And so that was hard. And then the deployment itself was just, there was a lot of fighting. And so had those two. And then I look in the future and it was just like, okay, I'm going to be in the infantry now forever. And it's going to be deployment after deployment after deployment, because this was 2009. So there was, we were getting ready for an Afghanistan deployment. And so it was like, damn, do you want to roll the dice again? And part of me did, part of me really wanted to, and part of me didn't. I think if I didn't have the family part of it, I think I would have done it. But I had the family pull, And then I could, so that after that, Emily basically, because she had my second deployment, she went to business school because she didn't want. I was actually in Germany as well. She didn't want to be in Germany for 15 months by herself, so she went to business school first, which was great. Yeah. And she kind of told me about what I could do at business school, and I looked at. She thought I'd like sales and trading, or I liked consulting. Yeah. And I wanted to get away from the call it locker room feel. Mm-hmm. I wanted to not be so testosterone, so macho. So I was like, sales and trading feels like it's going to be just like being in the infantry. I want to get away from that. And the consulting sounded really cool. And so I went to NYU for business, did consulting, and have been in consulting ever since.
They say Rangers lead the way, but it sounds like the wife leads the way sometimes, paving the path.
Definitely my wife.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's so much of that of like, you got to take everything with a balance, right? Mm-hmm. And there's good and bad in everything. And at a certain point, you just got to go like, because the Army, it is just like, what's best for the Army? Mm-hmm. And if your desires don't line up with that, too bad. Like you're like, suck it up or keep going or get out. And then when you say, well, I'm going to get out, they're like, no. Like, but actually, like, wait, what are ways that we can get you to stay in?
But even then, a lot of times you give them the ways and they're like, yeah, that's cool, but no.
Literally happened. I was like, can I get this, or this? No. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to get out. And they're like, why are you deciding to get out? I'm like, were you not part of this conversation? How was that transition process? I mean, not to get in, you had mentioned, right? I mean, kinetic deployments, like being in an, infantry units, that kind of quote unquote bro mentality. Yeah. And now suddenly you're in the civilian world. Like, was that jarring to you? I mean, obviously you had a very supportive wife. Mm-hmm. That probably played a big role into it. Huge. But then, I mean, you're still, right, going from a deployment to Mosul to sitting in a classroom.
Right. Yeah, I had to tone it down a lot. Yeah. And I still have to tone it. I mean, I'm kind of a high tempo guy. I think the first thing was just being more careful about my language. I mean, how infantry folks talk, like, it's not great, and it's definitely not acceptable in a civilian environment. Yeah. So kind of that, I had to be a lot more open, to different ways people are and still contribute. Not everyone's going to be clean cut, in shape, all these kinds of things, and just being more open to different people. Yeah. That was for me, just getting used to it, not being so judgmental. I think you tend to be, especially in infantry, there's a lot of judgment, a lot of competition, really trying to dial that back and relax. But I'll tell you what, I was just so happy the first few years. You're just, I can do whatever I want. Yeah. I can walk wherever I want.
I can keep my hands in my pocket.
Yeah, it's like,
Which is allowed now, apparently. Yeah, I think.
That's weird.
Yeah.
No, I'm cool with that. But the second thing was mental health stuff. And so what I tell a lot of people struggle with the VA, getting the right health care. I had a great experience at the VA. And they have a place called vet centers that offer free of charge, separate from the VA system, so you can call them up and get it right away. It's called vet centers, mental health counseling, like therapy, basically. And so I didn't realize I had an issue, but like I always had nightmares. Yeah. And I was just like, hey, you just have nightmares. I always had trouble sleeping. I was like, that's just how it is. But I remember I was actually at a project for an aerospace defense company, and I heard jets. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I had to go to the bathroom because I was having like a reaction. I had to hide in a stall for a minute. And I was like, what is this? It just came out of nowhere, And I was like, okay, let me see what's going on. And so I did
It wasn't the chili that
it wasn't the chili.
Like,
no. Yeah. I'm like weeping in the bathroom for reasons I don't understand, I'm like,
what's going on here?
I'm on the job. I heard a jet and now I'm crying in the bathroom. Like, what is going on? So I went to a vet center, and I was at the vet center for a couple of years. And for me, at least, the talk therapy stuff really helped understand how I was feeling, being able to identify emotions, being able to say, okay, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, whatever it is. But that for me helped me kind of incorporate the experience. And I read something, I think it was a Buddhist teacher, Jack Kornfield, that works with vets a lot. And he was talking about working with vets, and he says he uses this old like Celtic, where whenever the warriors would come home, the village would come together and would sing to them. So it was like bringing people back, and we've kind of lost that, right? Like we don't we don't have a lot of methods to be able to incorporate people back into society in an emotional or a kind of a spiritual way. And so that was reading about that. Obviously, I'm getting emotional now about it, but reading about that resonated with me. It still resonates with me.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the thing we have to do with like our warriors, is find those ways to kind of bring people back. And that's another reason, like service to school and other things like that. We're trying to create that community and try to bring people back together. And that's what I struggled with.
No, I mean, and thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And, you know, there's the Sebastian Younger of Restrepo talking about loss of tribe. I think there's so many things along those lines. And, you know, one thing that I always hear, not always hear, there's some veterans out there that still have that mentality of like, F your feelings, like, just like keep pushing through.
Yeah.
But the like reality is like no, like that's how like nothing changes, right? Like the idea that when you are a veteran, you can still have the same mentality, because there is some aspect of when you're deployed and you lose somebody, you need to just keep going. Like there's a mission to be done, and you have to bottle up those emotions and just keep going, because like that's what the mission entails. But like you're in a corporate job, or you're going to school, or you're doing this, the idea that you should just be bottling up your emotions and like your feelings, like just don't let it affect you, I think is a disservice to veterans, and frankly, like incredibly unhealthy. Right. Because now you're just perpetually getting just going overhead. I mean, or big crowded areas, and then it never actually gets solved. And so you're constantly actually just feeling those emotions without ever solving the problem. And it's like, no, you're not in the combat situation anymore. Yeah. You're not in a situation where that's required. Yeah. And frankly, in the civilian world, like you're going to need to take that into account, because you're going to have a colleague who didn't serve or didn't get deployed, and who is going to probably get pretty offended if you just like knife hand them and start yelling at them.
Well, and, I think it's also important to note. So yes, I was infantry, and I had, I think, probably more kinetic experiences than a lot of infantrymen, but I didn't have a lot of, there's always levels of it. But even the person who was joined and, refueled whatever on the base, like it's still very stressful, and everyone has different levels of stress ability. So I think it's important for anyone to not, if you have feelings of loss or feelings of, rage or whatever it is, you should try to work on those, try to either talk them out or acknowledge them, because what helps is acknowledging the feelings, and then they kind of pass through you. Yeah. That's what helped for me. And so I just don't want anyone who feels like they're not deserving of it, or, hey, I didn't do enough to go to do this, or I didn't do enough to feel this way. I think a lot of vets have that. Hey, I didn't do enough to feel this way. And that's just, that's not the case. Even if you weren't, you never saw actual combat, even if you weren't ever deployed, like you should still try to take care of yourself and not bottle up. And even those guys, the fuck your feelings guys, I know a lot of those guys, and it blows up at some point, and they are destructive to themselves or destructive to their families.
I avoided the VA for the longest time because, I had to. I'd done, and it's never a pissing contest, right? Yeah. But it's like, I had done, I was a forward observer, I deployed, whatever, but I never felt like, well, but there are people that had it way worse, and like by no means was it anywhere near as kinetic as other deployments. The deployment before mine was the Restrepo deployment, and so I was like, well, compared to that, That's really it's hard. Not as bad. And when I got out, I was able to move in with family, and I had, I got back on my dad's like health insurance. So for me, I kept doing this comparison of I'm so much better off than like other people I know. And so why would I go through this process when like I'm in this situation? And now obviously, well, not to go into the digression of the Economist article screenshot here on whether or not, but like I always felt that too, like, Am I deserving of this because I have this and I'm actually doing okay, but like I am struggling with this, but should I tax the VA system because like there may be other people more deserving of it than me. And like, I mean, like what I've come to learn is like, that's not how, like, no, like go seek help. Like,
go seek help.
And there's no value in doing well, I'm here and other people are here, Like to some extent, maybe like being grateful or having gratitude. Sure. But limiting yourself through that comparison, I think is dangerous.
Yeah. And just, you look, especially with the infantry guys, this is a problem. It being admitting, you know, I think it's better now, but you know, it's not a sign of weakness. It's to take care of yourself, right? It's not a sign of weakness to just try to hide it with, you know, drinking Jameson, right? Like, so yeah, I hope, you know, and I think it's a lot better. There's still a lot of challenges as reflected in kind of the veteran suicide rates. But it's important that there are support structures out there to help folks and that they go, you know, and that's a big part of the transition is taking care of your mental health, taking care of your physical health.
So you got out, school, obviously helped start services school. Like what is your journey now? Like where are you at and how did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, so I mean, I started consulting in a company called Booz & Co. at the time, and we got acquired by PwC and became Strategy in like 2014, 2015. Basically, I've been doing consulting ever since. And you know, everything you hear about consulting, you know, you're working on really tough problems, tough challenges. You're working with, you know, senior executives in a business. I found just really intellectually challenging and rewarding. And essentially, I've stayed in consulting. So I'm a partner now. Focused a lot on kind of operating model, we call it, questions. And I intend to, you know, stay a partner as long as I can.
What do you like about it?
It's one is the challenge. You know, if you're going to pay all the money you pay for consultants, it's going to be one of your top priorities. Yeah. So you're not going to work on a project that gets shelved. You're not going to work on a project that gets canceled. I mean, sometimes, but it's it's a top priority for that executive. 2, you're working with senior folks in the company. You learn about all businesses. So I feel confident that I could step into any business, big or small, at any function, at any level, and be able to add value. Because you just learn so much about the challenges business face. I've been able to work in every industry that there is, you know, different companies in every industry. I've worked with, you know, I think 20, 30 of the Fortune 500. So I've gotten to see how all these companies work. And then the people in consulting are all driven. You know, they're all high impact people. They're all really, really smart, really good at your analytics and strategic thinking. And so all that is really, you know, I think Steve Jobs said it's better to be a pirate than be in the Navy. So as far as, you know, as far as the corporate world goes, I feel like a consultant, you can be a pirate.
Yeah. And obviously Army Navy game tomorrow. Go Army, beat Navy.
Thank you.
What skills translated? You know, because I was actually just thinking about this today, right? And I mean, it is like the kind of hot button topic of, you know, like what are the soft skills? What are the hard skills? Like, did you find certain skills within your time in the service translate particularly well into the consulting world? And what things potentially the yelling, the knife hands, you know, the Army mannerisms didn't translate into that career path? I
will say I have had a mixed result of consulting. So I've been in consulting 15 years. I'm a partner. But I've had mixed results with vets in consulting. Some do really well, some do worse. I think vets tend to do better in corporate and maybe in financial services sometimes than in consulting. Although I know a lot of really great vets in consulting. I think one that translates is you get the job done. And a lot of times that's through the ability to suffer. So we're all PhDs in suffering. So whatever it takes, however many late nights it takes, you know, if you have to work a weekend, if you have to work a holiday, even if, you know, as a partner, you have to work holidays sometimes, you will do what you need to get the job done. So I think that's number one. I think number 2 is, and maybe this is part of getting the job done. We're really good at structuring work. Yeah. Like that is a skill that we are better at than anyone. We can take if you want something done by time X, we're really good at backwards planning on what has to get done to get to X. I think the third is, and this can be a double-edged sword, but is leadership. So we're very good at motivating people. We're very good at working across with peers and helping, you know, peers become better. We're usually good at leading it up. But, you know, sometimes in consulting, you get promoted in consulting because of your relationships and because of your ability to solve problems. leadership is a part of that, but it's not necessarily the biggest part. So sometimes, and especially anybody in the military, you're going to come in and have the most leadership experience and capability of probably anyone there.
Yeah.
And you'll see a lot of bad leadership, and that can be hard to that's the bad side of it is you see a lot of bad leadership, and with your clients, sometimes with your peers and other partners, and it's not going to get corrected. So you kind of got to live with it, and that's kind of galling. So I think those are the three big ones I found translate. I think there's a lot more, especially in consulting. One of the biggest things people have to learn is really strategic thinking, because in the military, you solve problems you get the commander's intent, a little bit of it, and then you go execute. But you can't do that in consulting. Consulting, you have to solve the problem all the way through up front before you get the data from the client. And that's a little harder for us because we're used to just getting a little bit and running with it. You're not going to learn by doing. And you are, but the consultants are hired not to learn by doing. Consultants are hired to have that strategic thinking, to be able to develop the framework up front to solve the problem before they take a step.
Yeah.
And so that's something that people have to kind of relearn. And the second thing I think people have to relearn is a little bit more tactical patience. I remember one of my first projects, there was an analysis that didn't get done that one of the executives wanted, and we're in a room, and I'm like a very junior. I'd just gotten out of business school. And I'm with partners, I'm with other folks, and this guy was aggressive. He's like, "Why didn't this get done?" And I was like, "Sir, I didn't do it." The right answer was to kind of pause and maybe let the partner, in a more artful way, explain why that particular analysis wasn't necessary, rather than just jumping on the grenade. So I think that's the other thing, is that there's a lot of different ways that manifests, but having more tactical patience and pausing and thinking a little bit more before taking responsibility or taking the blame or, jumping on the grenade.
As we wrap up, what does the future hold? Obviously, kid on the way.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated because I think there's some people have the 30-year plan. Some people have the 2-year plan, obviously, like partner, right? I think there's probably some level of, I know the path that I want to go down, but how do you think about your future and the steps that you're taking right now to get to those goals, even if they're maybe a little nebulous?
I mean, for me, it's corny, but I want to deliver value to my clients, and I think about my clients' problems, and I try to think, how can I help them with what they're facing, whatever that is, personal, professional. And so, it is, especially now, it feels like it wasn't like this when I started, but things are very tense in business. The need to deliver for shareholders, for your business, for your people, it's very high stress, and executives are under a lot of stress. And so I'm always thinking, what can I do right now with my clients that can help them? What can I share with them? What do we need to be doing for them to set them up for success? And that's really an absorbing job, and I love doing it. So that's really how can I continue to deliver for my clients? How can I build my team? How can I build the business? And so that's really, it's not necessarily a 5-year or 10-year. It's more like, hey, this week, what can I do? And trying to make sure I'm hitting all those things, and helping, others kind of be successful in their roles.
I think a lot of startups are like that too. Like, obviously there's the vision you have to sell investors, but at the same time, right? I mean, so much, I think a lot of people, when they think of like, entrepreneurship and startups, they're like, what's the vision that you're selling? Disrupting AI with blockchain technology, whatever, nice. Right? But like the reality is like, no, like your day-to-day is just, what do I have to solve this week? What do I have to solve next week? We have like X, Y, and Z that we need to get done. And it's so much more operational than I think the founders that I talk to who struggle are the ones that can only be the quote unquote vision person without actually understanding 99% of it is just all pure operations and like week 1 and 2. And this idea of like, what's 5 years from now, what's 10 years from now is a fraction of a percent.
Right.
Gus, as we wrap up, where can people find you, or any shout outs?
No, I
Obviously,
would just
Service to School.
Yeah, Service to School is the servicetoschool.org, s2s.org. If you're interested in college, you want to know what's out there for you, please reach out to us. We have an event March 15th in Boston with Nate Boyer, SF, former football player, NFL football player. If you're going to be in the Boston area, hit us up. We'd love for you to come. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being on, and I mean this with all sincerity. Literally, without services school, I would not be here.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Gus. Whoa, around the mic.